Sabel had not really worried about Pemer throughout the gather day as he wandered, or staggered, about in his assumed role of wine-happy herdsman. And when word flashed through the crowds that Lord Moran was to walk the gather, Sabel had no time to look for his apprentice. He had to concentrate on listening to the mutterings about Lord Moran and his curious generosity with fire lizard eggs that only hatched greens. If Lord Moran's appearance gave the lie to rumors that the man was dead or dying, it was apparent to Sabel's sharp eyes that the Lord Holder needed the support of the two men who walked beside him, arms linked in his. Some of his heirs, Sabel heard whispered in glum and disgusted tones. When the roasted beasts were being sliced for distribution to the gather crowd, Sabel...
Why is the microwave going?
It's my tea, but it can wait. Sabel did begin to search for Pemer. Surely the boy wouldn't miss free meat at Lord Moran's expense. Not that the beasts were juicy. Probably the oldest creatures in the whole herd, Sabel thought, endlessly chewing on his portion. He had placed himself at an end table about the gather square where Pemer ought to be able to see him. By the time the dancing started, Sabel began to worry. Natan would be returning for them at full dark, and he didn't want to impose on the bronze dragon rider by requiring him to wait about or return at a later time. It was then that Sabel wondered if Pemer had somehow gotten into trouble and maybe left the gather area. But if Pemer had gotten into trouble, surely he would have set up a howl for Sabel to rescue him. Perhaps he'd only crawled away for a nap. He'd had an early rising, and he might not be completely recovered from his fall. Sabel sent Kimi about the gather to see if she could locate the boy, but she returned, cheeping anxiously at her failure. He sent her then to the allotment, in case Pemer had gone there to wait. When that errand, too, was fruitless, Sabel appropriated a handy, fast-looking runner beast from the picket lines and made his way to their original meeting place, on the off chance that Pemer had returned there to wait for him and Natan. Though Sabel searched the valley carefully, he found no trace of his young friend. He was forced to admit that something had indeed happened to Pemer. That better stay on the plate and not go on the couch. She's scraping her toast. He couldn't imagine what, nor why Pemer, or whoever the lad might have crossed, had not sent for him as Pemer's master. He sped back to the hold, retied his borrowed mount, and reached the gather just as news of the theft of the queen egg rippled through the crowds. Feelings were mixed as that news spread. Anger from those who had received lesser eggs, and amusement that someone had outsmarted Lord Moran. By the time Sabel got to the hold gates, no one was being allowed in or out. Glow baskets shone on empty courtyards, and every window of the hold was brilliant with light. Sabel watched with the rest of the curious gatherers, while even the ash and refuse pits were searched. Wagers were being laid that somehow Caljan the miner had managed to steal the egg. Sabel was there when the master miner was escorted by guard into the hold after the man's baggage was thoroughly searched. An order was circulated, and additional guards posted to prevent anyone leaving the gather. Sabel positioned himself along the ramp parapet leading to the hold, where Pemer could easily spot him in the light from the hold's glows. Surely, if the boy had only fallen asleep, the noise would rouse him. It was only when word filtered through the crowd that some unknown drudge had made off with the precious egg that Sabel came to the startling conclusion that that drudge could have been Pemer. How the boy had managed to enter the guarded hold, Sabel couldn't figure out, but trust Pemer to find a way. Certainly it was like the boy to steal a fire lizard egg given the opportunity. A queen egg at that! Pemer never did anything by halves. Sabel chuckled to himself and then sent Kimi flying with the other agitated fire lizards to see if she could discover where Pemer was hiding. She returned and conveyed to Sabel that she couldn't get close to Pemer. It was too dark and too full. When Sabel questioned her for more detail, she grew distressed and repeated the image of darkness and her inability to reach the boy. The frenzy of the search mounted. Guards were now dispatched on fast runners up every road leading from the hold to find any travelers journeying from the gather. Sabel sent Kimi to the valley to warn Natan away in case the bronze rider was awaiting them. When Triss accompanied her back, Sabel knew that his warning had been timely. Triss chittered at him and then settled beside Kimi, giving Sabel the opportunity to send the fire lizard to bring Natan should he be needed. Both moons had risen by now, adding their soft light to the glows, but despite the fact that the guards endlessly searched and researched the hold and yards, their efforts proved vain. Delighted with Peemer's elusiveness, Sabel settled himself to wait out the night in the shadowy corner of the first cot below the ramp. He had a good view of the guards, and by carefully looking over the ramp wall, could see most of the courtyard. He was roused from a half-doze by the shouts and angry muttering as the guards prodded those who had lingered about the gates back down toward the gather area. "Go on now," the guards kept saying. "Go to your cots or your allotments. You'll be allowed to leave in the morning. No need to linger here. Go on with you now." The moons had set, and gone too were all the glow baskets that had illuminated the courtyards. Even the hold was in darkness, though some light seeped through the shutters of the Lord Holder's apartments on the first level. Curling himself into a tight ball in the shadows, Sabel hid his face and hands and ordered Kimi to tell Tris to be quiet and for both to keep their eyes closed. When the guards disappeared, he wondered what was happening. The hold was virtually unguarded as well as unlit. Was this some sort of trap to catch Peemer? Or should Sabel take advantage of this opportunity and sneak into the hold? Kimi rattled her wings in alarm, and through narrow slits in her eyes gleamed yellow with worry. Tris, too, stirred nervously. Then Sabel picked up from Kimi's mind the image of dragons. Furthermore, dragons that neither fire lizard knew. Just as that image faded in his mind, Sabel heard the sound of dragon wings, gliding from the northern shadows of the whole cliff. What? Are you... What?
Couch.
Did you dump the crumbs all over it?
No.
Is it clean?
Yes.
Good job. Gliding from the northern shadows of the whole cliff, he saw the black bulks of 4 dragons, wing on wing. 2 settled neatly into the kitchen courtyard, while the other pair landed in the main yard. Sabel heard hushed commands and then an unusual muted hubbub. Grunts and muffled oaths punctuated the activity. Sabel was considering moving out of his protective shadows for a better view when he heard a heavy groan, the unmistakable scrabble of talons on stone, and the equally identifiable swoosh of mighty wings making a powerful downstroke. In the one band of light in the kitchen courtyard, he saw the belly of a heavily laden bronze dragon struggling to rise, his sides bulging. No sooner had the first one cleared than the second dragon launched himself skyward. The 2 in the main courtyard moved to the kitchen yard. More activity ensued, conducted with hoarse whispers and low-voiced commands. All during this, Kimi and Tris shivered, clinging to Sabel in a fashion they had never exhibited in the vicinity of other dragons. It took no great effort for Sabel to conclude that he had witnessed Lord Moran delivering goods to the old-timers from the southern weir. That queen fire lizard egg had probably been prepayment for whatever the dragons had lugged away. Sabel heard the sound of low voices coming from the direction of the gather, and he hastily nipped back to his dark corner, warning the 2 fire lizards to close their eyes as he hid his face and hands again. After moments of boots scuffling and muttered phrases, there was silence. Cautiously raising his head, he saw that the guards were back in position and that the glow baskets again glowed on ramp and hold walls, illuminating the roads leading up to the hold. He was trapped in his shadowy corner. Nor did he dare to send Kimi or Tris from him, for their flight would surely be noticed when there wasn't another fire lizard to be seen. With a sigh, he settled himself as comfortably as he could. Kimi draped warmingly about his shoulders, and Tris curled at his side. He couldn't have slept very long before he was rudely awakened by the boom of the message drums. "Urgent to the healer. Lord Moran very ill. Master Harper required. Urgent, urgent, urgent." Had they then caught Peemer, and recognizing him, summoned Master Robinson to account for the misbehavior of one of his apprentices? Lord Moran would like nothing better than to be able to humiliate Master Robinson, for any censure of the Master Harper would also touch the Bend and Weir leaders, whom Lord Moran hated.
I'm gonna go see if there's chicken nuggets.
Okay. Oh well, if that were the case, at least the boy had been found. Sabel felt certain that Master Robinson could handle Lord Moran's accusations. And yet, why was Master Oldive so urgently required? No hold drummed that measure unless the emergency was critical. The hold's fire lizards had been awakened by the boom of the big message drums and now wheeled about in the glow light. Sabel unwrapped Kimi's tail from his neck, and holding her slender body in his hands, compelled her to look at him while he gave her directions to Manoli. He thought hard about clean clothes and imagined himself dressed in Harper blue. Kimi chirped understandingly, and after stroking his chin with her head, launched herself up. Trish chirped questioningly, tugging at Sibel's sleeve. Natan would be a good ally, but strictly speaking, the Fort Weir leader had no genuine business here, since Nabal was beholden to Debor of the high reaches Weir. So Sibel looked deeply into Triss's lightly whirling eyes, and thought hard that Natan need not come to the valley, and sent the little brown back to his friend at Fort Weir. The message drum boomed a repeat, emphasizing again the urgency. Sibel strained his ears for the relay drums at the next point, but a handful of guards quick-stepped down the road toward the gather, and their passing masked the distant sounds. Dawn was just breaking when Sibel, scanning the lightening sky, saw a dragon emerge. As the creature circled gracefully down, Sibel was relieved to note the silhouettes of 4 riders. He was perplexed because the dragon's spiraling descent would not put the party in the hold's courtyard, where logically they would be expected to land. Abruptly, Kimi appeared in the air above him, chittering excitedly and darting off toward the gather meadow. Her mind pictured Manoli. When Sibel did not move quickly enough to please her, she hovered at his shoulder and tugged at his dirty tunic, darting off again toward the meadow. "I understand, of course. I'm tired. That's why I'm slow, Kimi," he said. Sticking to the shadows, he skirted the cot and started down the deserted road until he was far enough away from the guards. Then he picked up his feet and ran down the deserted road toward the new arrivals. He reached them just as the blue dragon left. "Ah, Sibel," said the master harper, for all the world as if he were welcoming his journeyman into his rooms at the Harper Hall instead of surreptitiously meeting on a dark meadow in early dawn. "Manoli, hand him his clothes. He can tell us what's been happening while he changes. Is Lord Moran so desperately ill?" "Probably. Of temper, if nothing else," replied Sibel, stripping off his tunic and getting a shower of dust and grit in his hair and face. "He walked the gather last evening." "He what?" exclaimed Master Oldive, cocking his head up at Sibel in surprise. "He had to. And then someone stole a fire lizard queen from the hearth of his bedroom." "No!" Laughter as well as amazement colored the harper's exclamation. "Peemer?" asked Manoli at the same moment. "Is that why he isn't with you?" "Is that why I've been summoned? To witness the punishment of a thieving apprentice?" Master Robinson was no longer amused. "I don't know, master. Kimi located Peemer in the hold, but she couldn't explain where, and she couldn't get to him because it was too dark. I know the guards spent hours searching the hold. Presumably they know it better than Peemer could, but—" Sibel paused. "I'm bloody certain they would have made some sort of commotion if they had found him and recovered that egg. Nothing would give Lord Moran more satisfaction than to force me to punish an apprentice thieving in his hold." "The message clearly states that Lord Moran is ill," said Master Oldive. "If he was foolhardily enough to walk his gather and then agitate himself over the loss of a queen egg, he could indeed be very ill in his condition." "It's accepted fact among the Nabalese," said Sibel, gratefully throwing aside his herdsman's cracked boots, which had rubbed his heels raw, "that the man's dying." He glanced up at Oldive and saw the healer's head move affirmatively. "Did you find out whom the Nabalese prefer as heir?" asked Master Robinson. "A grand-nephew, Decker. A carter who runs a steady business between Nabal and Crom. He's got 4 sons that he keeps firmly in line." "Honey, stop, you're going to pull that down." "He's not a friendly man, but he's got the grudging respect of those who know him." Sibel had finished dressing and now gestured the group toward the hold. "I've also discerned that there are more fire lizards in and about Nabal than there ought to be. Most of them," and he paused to give his words more weight, "are green." "Green?" Manoli swung on him in surprise. "Yes, green." "You mean," Manoli went on, "he's been distributing eggs from green fire lizard clutches? Why, the bloody beast!" "On top of that insult, a lot of the eggs don't hatch at all, so you can imagine how little his generosity endears Lord Moran to the recipients," Sibel added grimly. "Of more importance," and Sibel held up his hand to forestall her angry words, "just after moonset, 4 dragons landed right in the courtyards, and lifted off again so heavily laden you could hear their wings creaking." Sibel grinned at the expressions of shock from his companions. Further, Kimi didn't know those dragons, and their presence frightened her. "Now that is the most interesting piece of news you've given me," remarked the master harper. He said no more, because they'd reached the foot of the ramp to the hold, and the group of men waiting there impatiently rushed down to meet them. Sibel recognized the hold's harper, Candler, and the healer, Berdine. Of the other 3, he recognized the 2 men who had supported Lord Moran on his gather walk. The fatter man barred straight up to the harper. Master Robinson, I'm Hittet of the blood, and you simply must assist us. The situation must be clarified with all possible dispatch. As I'm sure Master Oldive will tell you, there's no time to be lost. The others exclaimed in support of his words. I fear that after the alarms and excitements of this night, the poor man cannot long survive. But come, we must hurry. Then he took the harper by the arm and urged him toward the hold. Alarms and excitements? Ah, yes, you had a gather yesterday, Master Robinson was saying. I can't thank you enough for responding, Master Oldive, said Burdine, falling in step with the healer as the others followed Hittet and Master Robinson across the court. I know you said that there was nothing more you could do for Lord Moran, but the truth of the matter is that he is sadly taxed what strength has left him. I warned him. Oh, I did most explicitly that he ought not walk the gather, but he was adamant, had to reassure his holders. I think that would have been safe enough, but then he insisted on having guests in his apartment. So much excitement. And then to discover the queen egg had been stolen. Burdine fluttered his hands in distress. Oh my, oh my. I was beside myself trying to calm him. He wouldn't take that draught you left me for such an emergency. He became utterly uncontrollable when they couldn't find that wretched drudge who'd stolen the egg. Journeyman Burdine, said Hittet in challenging tones, whipping about to stare warningly at the healer. That interruption was timely made, for none of the Nabalese saw the looks of relief that the harpers exchanged. A drudge stealing an egg? Asked the harper, as if he didn't believe his ears. Yes, if you must know, began Hittet, still glaring at the indiscreet healer. Lord Moran was recently given a clutch of fire lizard eggs, one of which was thought to be a queen egg. He naturally took the best care of such prizes, kept them on his own hearth. He's had a lot of experience with fire lizards, you see. He was to distribute the eggs to deserving people as the high point of the gather feast. When his rooms were being freshened, one of the kitchen drudges had the audacity to steal the queen egg. How? We can't yet understand. But it's gone, and that wicked lad is somewhere in the hold. Hittet's tone augured ill for Pemer when he was found. None of the Nabalese noticed Beauty, Zare, and Kimi peeling off from airy escort and darting out an open window as the group traversed the main hall. Sibel gave Manoli's hand a reassuring squeeze. She didn't look at him, but her lips curved slightly in a smile of relief. You can appreciate how upset Lord Moran was when the theft was discovered, and I fear this, and our pressing him to name an heir, resulted in his collapse, Hittet was saying to Master Robinson. Collapse? Master Oldive looked sternly at Burdine, who immediately got his tongue twisted, trying to vindicate himself to his craftsmaster. Master Oldive now brushed past Hittet and Master Robinson, and, with the still apologetic Burdine on his heels, ran up the steps with no regard to his physical handicap or dignity. Master Robinson also quickened his pace until the fat Hittet was forced to run to keep up. Sibel and Manoli deliberately slowed, to give their fire lizards a chance to range through the hold and locate Pemer. If you could know how good it is to see a friendly face, said Candler, quite willing to match their laggard advance to the Lord's apartments. If anyone can make that dreadful man see reason, it's Master Robinson. Lord Moran won't name an heir. That's why he collapsed, to avoid it. He was furious about the egg theft, to be sure, but while they were searching, he was more like himself, totally disagreeable, and planning all kinds of fiendish punishments when they caught the drudge. Frankly, Sibel, he wants the hold in contention. You know how he hates Bendon. And now, and Candler laughed sourly, none of the relatives who've been badgering him to name one of them wants to be the heir. I don't know why. They changed their tune abruptly this morning. Just as well, Candler snorted with disgust. Any one of the lot would create disorder in next to no time. Changed their minds early this morning, did they? Said Sibel, grinning at Manoli. Yes, and I can't figure out why. Every single one of them has done all he could to secure the nomination. Now, I'd heard that Decker was an honest man. Dector? Candler swung toward Sibel in surprise. Oh, the carter. He gave a mirthless laugh. I suppose he could be considered an heir, couldn't he? Grandnephew, isn't he? Forget about him. Which is probably Dector's doing. Said he could make more money carting than he could holding. He's probably right. How'd you know about him? Looked up the Naboe bloodline. Could one of you let Callie out? Beauty flitted back, skimming so close to Candler that he ducked. Rocky, Zare, and Kimi followed her, all chittering in some distress. Yep. All had the same message. Pemer was not in the hold. Sibel and Manoli exchanged glances. Would he have hidden somewhere outside? Manoli asked. Sabel gave a quick shake of his head. Keamy couldn't find him. Rocky and Beauty have been much closer to Peemer than Keamy. Can't hurt to try. Peemer? Asked Candler, mystified by this cryptic exchange. I've reason to believe that the theft was accomplished by Peemer, said Sabel. He and Manoli gave their fire lizards new instructions and watched them dart out the hold door. Peemer? But I remember Peemer, the boy with the fine soprano. I didn't see him anywhere. Candler broke off and pointed at Sabel. You were there when Lord Moran walked the gather. The very drunken herdsman. I thought there was something familiar about him. It was you. Well, and Peemer's here too? On Harper business. I thought it odd for one of Moran's drudges to have so much initiative. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Peemer is not in this hold. How could he have gotten out? Asked Sabel. I was just beyond the ramp all night. Even if I didn't see him, Keamy would have. They'd reached the Lord's apartments now, and Candler opened the door, gesturing them to precede him. What's that smell? Asked Manoli softly, grimacing in distaste. Smell? Oh, you get used to it. Disgusting, I know, but it has something to do with Lord Moran's illness. We try to mask it, and Candler gestured to the sweet candles alight in the containers about the room. I often think that it's only justice, he added in a careful whisper, for the suffering he's given others. But it's a terrible way to die. I thought Master Oldive had given him, Sabel began. Oh, he has. The strongest there is, according to Burdine, but the medicine only dulls the pain. The doors to the next two rooms were open, and the Harpers could see the clusters of men standing about in silence, all avoiding each other's gaze. Suddenly, in the third room, there was a brief flurry as the Harper appeared at the door of the Lord's private room. Sabel! Master Robinson's calm request carried clearly, and everyone turned to watch the journeyman hurry to his master's side. Please send a drum message to Lords Otril, Nessel, and Bargain, and to Weirleader Tabor. Will they please attend us here at Nabola immediately? Double urgency on the beat, please. Yes, sir, said Sabel, with such unexpected vigor that Master Robinson gave him a mild second look. But Sabel turned on his heel and walked swiftly out of the apartments, motioning as he passed them for Candler and Manoli to come with him. I don't know I didn't think of it earlier, Manoli. If Peemer got out of the hold and is hiding somewhere in the hills, he'll surface to a drum message aimed at him. Lead us to your drum heights, Candler. The big message drums needed only to be uncovered. Sabel stood for a moment, beaters poised over the taut height as he composed his message. The opening roll boomed across the valley, the urgent measure following as the last echoes died. Then Sabel, eyes half closed in concentration, beat out the recipients' names, the Harper's request, and the urgent measures once again to ensure immediate reply and attention. Manoli positioned herself at the window then, ears straining to catch the pass-along roll from the next drum heights. There it is from the east, she told the two men. What's wrong with the northern listeners? Still asleep? Ah, there they are. Candler, any chance of some food? Sabel asked the hold Harper. We'd best wait here for replies. Yes, let's eat here where the air is clear, said Manoli, with a shudder as she thought of the thick, distasteful odor in Lord Moran's rooms. Of course. I apologize for not offering sooner. Candler was away down the stairs. Sabel picked up the sticks again and beat a quick measure. Apprentice, report, urgent. He waited a few breaths and then repeated the measure. If he's anywhere between here and Ruratha or Crom, he'll hear that, Sabel said, carefully replacing the drumsticks on their hooks before he joined Manoli at the window. Her face was sad and her brows constricted in a tiny frown as she gazed across the huddle of cots, below the hold ramp and over the disorganized gather square, still tenanted by those unwillingly held over by the emergency. Few sounds wafted to their ears at this height, and the scene was unrealistically calm. Don't fret over Peemer, Manoli, Sabel said, trying to sound more light-hearted than he felt. He has a knack of landing on his feet. He smiled down at her, allowing himself the luxury of putting his arm lightly about her shoulders. Except when the steps are greased. Manoli's voice had an angry edge, and he gripped her shoulder reassuringly. Look at it this way.
Mom?
Just see how that I'm almost done. Just see how that misadventure has worked to his advantage. He got out of the drum heights and acquired himself a queen fire lizard egg. For all we know, he may meet us at the hold gates with it, smiling in that ingenious fashion of his, when you and I know he's as devious as Moran. I wish I could believe you, Sabel, Manoli said, sighing heavily, but she leaned trustingly against him for his comfort. If he was anywhere in the vicinity, Beauty and Rocky ought to have found him. "He's somewhere," replied Sibel firmly, and daring more than ever, he gave her a quick hug, turning abruptly from her as he caught her startled look. "The wretch," he added, more of a growl than a comment. At that moment they both heard the message drum roll across the mountains, and Sibel hastily strode back to the drums. Candler arrived just as Sibel beat receive for the last of the messages. The Nabal harper was panting with the exertion of his climb, for he carried not only a well-laden tray, but a full wineskin slung over his shoulder. The three harpers had time to make a leisurely meal before the first of the visitors arrived. The harpers then escorted the lord holders and Tabor to the master harper. Sibel almost gagged and lost his breakfast when he brought Lords Holder Nessel and Bargain into Lord Moran's inner room. Manoli was already there with Lord Ulterel and Weirleader Tabor. He saw her mouth working to control the revulsion she was obviously feeling. Only Candler seemed impervious to the odor. Although Sibel had seen Lord Moran the day before, he was appalled by the change in the man propped up in the bed. The eyes were sunken. Pain had lined his face deeply. His skin was a pale yellow, and his fingers, plucking nervously at the fur rug that covered him, were claws. Oh, Lord.